In 2013, director Richard Curtis and star Donald Gleason gave the world a tranquil traipse that highlighted the importance of valuing each and every day.
In 2022, we finish out our sampler of 4 Speyside single malts.
The film is About Time.
The whiskey is Glenlivet 14.
And we'll review them both. This is
the Film and Whiskey Podcast. Welcome to the Film and Whiskey Podcast, where each week we review a classic movie and a glass of whiskey. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And this week we are looking at Richard Curtis's film About Time. This is a movie.
Bob.
What?
What's this movie about?
Yeah, do you get it? It has a double meaning.
Do you get it, Bob?
But do you get it, though?
I don't know if I do.
Brad, aside from the awful name of this movie, I want to say this is a film that you and I have talked about at length before. Maybe not on the show, but with each other, because it's a movie we both really like. And it's one of those movies that you and I were kind of like making sure got on one of our lists for this season. And I'm really, really glad that it landed on your list so that we get a chance to talk about it today. I feel like this movie, it's almost like Chef in the way that I think a lot of people have caught it on streaming platforms. But when it came out, it made so little of a splash. I remember it got really good reviews. I went to see it in the theater with my wife. We had a great time at the movies. And like no one else knew what this movie even was.
Which is just incredibly unfortunate, Bob, because this, in my opinion, is one of the best movies of the 2010s.
Wow.
Like I really think that it hits the nail on the head in so many different ways. And I'm blown away by how many people haven't seen it, because the acting is spectacular, the cinematography is spectacular, the story, the writing, the camera work. There's so much in this movie I love, and I want more people to see it, Robert.
I'll tell you what, like, I know you've never been big into buying physical media, but this is one of those movies that we saw it in the theater, we loved it. I immediately got it, like, on DVD at the time. I wasn't into Blu-ray yet because I was dumb, and and I don't think I've watched it since, Brad. So it was really interesting coming back to this movie with, I guess, 8 years, almost 9 years of distance. And I definitely have some quibbles with the movie. I have some things that I think really could have tightened up the movie a little bit. But for the most part, man, this thing really, it just still works so well. And, you know, the last 15 minutes of the movie, I was just an absolute puddle on the floor. Like, the emotional core of this movie still works like gangbusters.
Dude, Bill Nighy as his father he's
so good. He's so good.
It's amazing to me how emotional I got over him in this movie. I was just flabbergasted.
Yeah, man. Did you cry?
I did not actually cry this time through. The first time I watched it, I wept like a baby.
Yeah.
This time through, no tears.
Wow. All right. Well, you've just become dead inside, but it's okay. It happens to all of us at some point. So, but before we dwell too long, let's get into Brad Explains, the part of the podcast where Brad breaks down the plot of the film that he has just seen, often for the first time. That is not the case today. This is one of Brad's movies, so you know that he's got something good up his sleeve when it comes to explaining this movie. My friend, you have 60 seconds on the clock. Can you break down the plot of this film?
Tim is a nice young British boy. He turns 21, and his dad tells him, hey, by the way, you can travel through time. Bonkers realization, right? So he immediately uses it to go back in time a few hours and kiss a girl. So putting it to good use right away. The whole point of the movie, Bob, is finding out the beauty of what each and every normal day looks like. We follow Tim as he finds himself falling in love with Rachel McAdams. We see him take care of some of his best friends. We see him pour into the life of his sister, who's a bit of a free spirit. The way he sacrifices himself continually for his family, for his friends, is really beautiful. and we get to see him have children.
5 seconds.
And be a loving son, and it just makes you sob.
Time.
It's beautiful.
It does.
And it's good.
It does.
It's just good, Bob. I think that's like, for me, this movie's just good. And it's good in the sense of like, it's a well-made movie, but it's also just morally good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what's going to end up happening today is that I'm going to just make endless comparisons between this movie and others, because I kind of feel like almost the best way to explain this movie to someone who's never seen it is to kind of do the whole, it's kind of got like a piece of this thing and then a little bit of this thing, and imagine mashing those up with each other. And there are so many things watching this movie that it really reminded me of. But I think the really appropriate place to start here is the comparison to It's a Wonderful Life. It has so much of It's a Wonderful Life in it, especially in that, the protagonist is just a good-hearted person. And at the end of the day, this is a movie about that person learning to appreciate his life a little bit more. Where I think that this movie kind of differs from It's a Wonderful Life, aside from the fact that, well, I was going to say there's sci-fi elements, but there's kind of, the supernatural in It's a Wonderful Life too.
Yeah, a little bit.
I think what really stuck out to me this time, and not in a way that I really liked, was how much of this movie is dedicated to kind of like broad comedy. Like they do a lot of gags and a lot of bits. And it's kind of like, I'd say the first hour and a half of this 2-hour movie, it'll be really serious or it'll be really heartfelt. And then as soon as they try to do something funny, these characters turn into caricatures, I think, every once in a while. And in that way, I was kind of comparing it in my mind to a movie that you actually just brought up a few weeks ago in one of our top 5 episodes, and that's Adam Sandler's Click. And I feel like this movie kind of sits right in between Click and It's a Wonderful Life. Like they're all thematically similar, but It's a Wonderful Life is for the most part, a very serious movie. And then, Click is like full of poop humor. And this movie's kind of like straddling the line between those two, if that makes sense.
I feel like you're leaning a little closer to Click than I would feel for this movie. I don't really think that I noticed like the gag humor quite as much as you. And every time that I've ever seen it, I've never once thought of this as like a comedy in any way. To me, the humor in this movie feels more honest to like normal life than it would just like a straight comedy. I don't know.
No, I think that's a good point, Brad. And it's not as if this is like a really juvenile kind of movie, but I think that it kind of seemed like for a while they were treading water to me, where it was almost like Richard Curtis, when he sat down to write this movie, was like, I have an incredible idea for the ending of a movie. He was like, well, I need another hour and a half at the front of this. And so sometimes it kind of felt like the social awkwardness of some of these situations. And like the whole premise of the movie is like, he can go back 3 minutes and fix something stupid he said and put his foot in his mouth. But like by the 7th or 8th time I saw him do that, I was kind of like, all right, I get it. Let's move on from this a little bit. So maybe it's more just like pacing issues than it was the actual comedy to me. But I will say that there is a reason that I think you and I really like this movie. And I was actually going to save this for the back half of the episode, but I think it's worth bringing up now. Brad, this movie has a ton of DNA in common with How I Met Your Mother. Like a ton. In that it can go from like this really broad comedy to really witty comedy to really heartfelt to absolute tearjerker. And it even has the like whoosh sound effect going on where like every time on How I Met Your Mother where they flash back or flash forward, it makes that whooshing sound effect. And it happens in this movie every time Tim goes into like a closet and clenches his fists so that he can travel back in time. And it really hit me towards the end of the film. You find out that his dad is passing away, and Tim tries to do what he can to continue to revisit his dad until he realizes he's got to let him go.
What's my prize apart from the Olympic gold medal, of course?
A kiss will have to do.
A kiss? A kiss? Oh. Ah, I get you. This is it, then?
This is it. It's my last bit of extra time. The baby is completely on the way.
And there's a long sequence where they're kind of at his funeral. And it hit me at that point because the music even reminded me of the series finale of How I Met Your Mother, where they finally show how he met the mom and the piano track that's playing in the background there. And I was like, it blew my mind, dude. I was like, now I know why I like this movie so much.
Yeah, it's a better version of How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, pretty much. And I love How I Met Your Mother, but yes.
I was going to say, it's a phenomenal show, but, you know, the big complaint about the show is that it took so damn long to meet the mother. And this one, you meet her like 25, 30 minutes into the movie.
Absolutely.
And it's great. You get to spend the whole time with her.
I don't know. Does that comparison make sense, though? I feel like just the vibes that you get from How I Met Your Mother are very similar to the feel, the rhythm of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only place the comparison kind of falls off a little bit, and this is a genuine complaint that I have about the movie, is that you don't get the sense of camaraderie between Tim and some of his friends that I kind of wish you did. Like there's certain points in the movie where I'm like, I feel like somewhere on the editing room floor, there's like one or two extra scenes of him and Harry, played by Tom Hollander. You know, like it's really when he's choosing who is going to give his best man speech. And he does his friend Jay, and then his friend Rory, and then his friend Harry. And like, there's a certain point where with all three of them, you're like, oh, I don't know. Is that person actually his best friend? Because you don't really get to spend enough time with them. Yeah. Like the only one that really fits is Jay. And that's because you don't need much time with Jay to establish, oh, we've been best friends since childhood.
Yeah.
But with Rory and with Harry, I'm like, there's a little bit of that camaraderie that's missing where in a movie that is so focused on the beauty of everyday moments, I kind of wish there was a few more of those with his friends and not just with his father and with his wife.
I totally agree. And I think this is actually a perfect segue into talking about the performances here. Because I want to hold off on talking about his father and his wife, Bill Nighy and Rachel McAdams. And let's just talk about Domhnall Gleeson and his friends at first, because I think it'll really help illustrate what I think is probably the biggest flaw with the movie. So Domhnall Gleeson, I think, does a great job in this movie. And he's a really good actor who I feel like is underutilized even today. Like, you know, he did the Star Wars thing and they completely really just ruined his character. I felt like they did him a huge disservice. And seeing him here in a much more laid back kind of performance, he has great chemistry with Rachel McAdams. He has great chemistry with his family on screen. You really feel like this is a real family. Those characters feel lived in and familiar with each other. I really loved his performance, Brad.
Yeah, Domhnall Gleeson is just a knockout perfect. He is just a perfect casting for this role. He plays kind of the tall, awkward, gangly young person trying to gain his way in the world just so spectacularly. And yet it's his earnestness and his honesty that really sells the romance with Rachel McAdams. Like you believe 100% that even if he didn't have the ability to change time, to go travel back in time, he would have gotten her. And I think that was really important for me this, third time watching it, was the fact that the first time he meets her and the first time they interact, he doesn't ever have to go back in time. He gets her number. He wins the girl without the powers of time travel. And I didn't realize it until this time through, but I was like, that to me is so important because it makes their romance believable. Like, he didn't have to trick her into dating him or marrying him. Like, there was chemistry there from the start. And I think that Domhnall Gleeson just does a spectacular job with what this movie asks him to do.
Yeah, totally agree. And then I feel like the supporting roles in this movie, I think Lindsay Duncan as his mom is fantastic. Brad, we've had her on the podcast before. She was like the mean, vicious critic in Birdman. And now she's here playing a much different character. I do have to say that there's some interesting portrayals of women in this film, and I think I'll kind of get into that more with Rachel McAdams. But Did it kind of strike you as interesting that they kept referring to his mom as like kind of fat and she's like very much a skinny woman? Like they keep calling her sturdy throughout the whole movie. And then you see her like they're playing croquet or something. And I'm like, she's very in shape. I don't really understand what the criteria is here in England for being a sturdy woman.
Oh, I didn't take it as like large or big boned in any way. I took it as personality.
Oh, interesting.
Like the way she interacts with people, the way she carries herself, like she is a sturdy woman who is not, like beaten down by the storms of life. Like when they are going to see the family when they find out about, Tim's father's cancer, that line she delivers I think it's one of the best lines in the movie when she looks at Rachel McAdams and goes, I am wholly uninterested in living life without your father.
Oh, what a heartbreaking line. And it's just so, I think the thing about this movie, what it does really well is when it hits, it hits this like specific area of your heart that is like, that's truth right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most eloquently phrased thing, but for her to just say it like that, I am just wholly disinterested in living a life without your father. I'm like, like that.
Yeah.
It's heavy, man.
There's so many beautiful things about this movie. But yeah, I think that for me is what, when they said sturdy, I took it to be more of a personality sturdy than being.
Got it. So this cast is rounded out. This is one of those casts that you only really get in a movie before they all become famous. But
dude, Vanessa Kirby,
Academy Award nominee, is just hanging out as like best friend of Rachel McAdams. You've got Tom Hollander, one of the best character actors working in England in here. Richard E. Grant shows up as one of the people in Tom Hollander's play, Academy Award nominee. I'm pretty sure the other guy in that scene is the guy that played Uncle Vernon in the Harry Potter series. So like,
it sure is.
It's like the most amazing British cast I've seen in years and years outside of a Harry Potter movie.
Yeah, I was going to say this is our second Tom Hollander film this season. We had him on for Pride and Prejudice.
That's right.
So, yeah, dude, we're just running through a spectacular cast here. You're right. In watching this, I was like, I saw Vanessa Kirby and I'm like, wait, what else has she been in? And, look her up and I'm like, she's been in Mission Impossible. She's in Pieces of a Woman. Mm-hmm. She's in The Crown. Like,
yeah,
she's just stellar.
All right, Brad. So I'm not sure if we've done a good enough job of explaining the fact that this movie is kind of a soft sci-fi movie. And I think to its credit, the sci-fi element of it, the time travel of it all, it's not, I almost hesitate to call it sci-fi because it's not as if they get into a machine and do something, to travel back in time. It's just this ability that the men in this family possess. But this movie is shot in such a way that, it's mostly handheld cameras. It's very grounded and it's all about relationships. And so it's kind of perfect for the indie vibe it's going for. This is not an indie movie, but it has that kind of vibe to it. And I think it's really interesting because when I think about this movie, like I know that time travel is the central, plot point of the movie. But I don't walk out of the movie thinking about how it's a time travel movie. Does that make sense?
100%. I'm on the IMDb page right now, and it classifies this movie, and this is to your credit, as a comedy first, which I would not have expected, as a drama second, and as fantasy third. And I actually think that that's the right way to classify this movie. Like, most of the time when you talk about time travel, it is a science fiction type of concept. But in this movie, I really would term it more in the realm of fantasy, in that most science fiction, it will explain how things work. It wants to get into the intricacies of the science of what's happening. Whereas this is just pure fantasy. It's the random magical ability. Honestly, it almost feels like Harry Potter. Like in the world of Harry Potter, magic is just something that some people have and some people don't. Mm-hmm. And if you're a magic, family, it's much more likely that you gain the ability, but it's not guaranteed. And if you come from non-magical parents, you can get the ability just randomly. And so I would say that this is more of a fantasy film than science fiction. And it works because if you go into this like wanting to learn about time travel, this isn't going to be your movie. Go watch Interstellar or something. If you go into this movie looking for a really beautiful story that illustrates the importance of really cherishing every moment, this is the movie for you.
Mm-hmm. So I do want to say, I think it's interesting that none of the top 3 genres or categories for this movie on IMDb are romance, because, like, ostensibly, on the surface and in all the marketing materials, this movie was sold as, like, a romantic movie. And that's not to say that it's unromantic. It's very much a portrait of a very happy and healthy marriage. But, Brad, I think that it's kind of a segue for me to start talking about Rachel McAdams' character in this movie. And I will say up front, I love Rachel McAdams. I am a fan of everything she does. I think she's a great actress, and I think she's great in this movie, and they have amazing chemistry. But I was shocked at how much I felt like Rachel McAdams' character, the writing of her character, suffered from the same thing that Kirsten Dunst's character did in Elizabethtown, which was that at the end of the day, if you really step back and look at what her character does in this movie, she really only exists to like affirm and support Domhnall Gleeson's character. We kind of find out a little bit about her. Like we see her parents and you learn about her likes and her dislikes, her love of Kate Moss. It's an interesting little quirk they give her. But like at the end of the day, I kind of felt like she was just there to confirm to the audience that her husband is a really good guy. And I don't feel like she was really much of a character at the end of the day. And I'm sure you're going to disagree with me, but I really think if you step back for a little bit and think about like what she actually does in this movie, first of all, she's in it way less than I remembered her being in it. And I think when she's there, she's kind of just always telling him like what a great guy he is. And that was kind of a surprise to me on revisit.
I'm not going to disagree with you that she's not there a ton, that her character isn't super dynamic. What I will say is that she isn't the point of the movie, and that their relationship isn't the point of the movie. And I know that all the marketing is about it. The cover of the movie is, their wedding ceremony as they're getting rained on. Like, it definitely was marketed as a romance, but for me, this movie isn't about the romance or the marriage. It really is about Tim and his coming to accept the fact that his strange time-traveling powers aren't going to give him the ability to appreciate things. Like, only his willingness to live in the moment is going to do that. And so for me, the romance between the two of them, while it's important to the film and helpful, and I think it's really well done, I don't find that to be the main part of the movie. It's just one relationship of many that is important. And if you make that complaint about, Rachel McAdams, then I think you have to make the exact same complaint about Bill Nighy. He's perfect. He is the perfect father. He is well-read and educated and intellectual, and yet he's also down to earth and plays table tennis and is funny and, cracks jokes. And so, is he just, he's unrelatable. He's not, nobody's that perfect of a father.
I think
okay, maybe not.
You make a good point, but I think the way that the movie kind of lets itself off the hook there is through the implication that because he could also travel through time, that, most scenes that you're seeing of him is probably like his second take at that interaction. Like he's a perfect father because he has the ability to go back in time and not screw things up anymore. And I think where Rachel McAdams' character, it kind of left me wanting is that she's just portrayed as like this perfect, and like even the fact that they write her like incredible insecurity into her character, which I'm not saying that like somebody that beautiful can't be insecure.
You really like me? Even my frock?
I love your frock.
And my hair? It's not too brown.
I love brown.
The fringe is new.
The fringe is perfect. Fringe is the best bit.
We have to go! I found a car and his dodgy friend is about to assault me.
Okay, I'm coming. 2 seconds. I hope I see you again.
You will.
Okay.
But it's just the way that, Donald Gleason, who is just, objectively a goofy looking man, is just like talking about her haircut. And she's like, no, I'm hideous. And I'm like, no, you're Rachel McAdams and you're talking to Donald Gleason. Like, let's keep some perspective here. Do you know what I mean? I think they try to make her out a little too much to just be like the quote unquote, like perfect movie wife. And I think for me, it left me a little bit like, okay, like we could have added a few layers to this character.
I mean, I don't disagree that you could have added a few more layers. To me, she felt very real.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she felt very far-fetched. The idea of a pretty girl struggling with if she likes a new haircut she just got feels very honest to me. So I loved Rachel McAdams in this. I think she's spectacular. I think the part was really well written. I didn't really have any issues with it.
Well, do you have any final thoughts on Bill Nighy as the dad? Because I think for me, he's the best performance in the movie. He's almost always the best performance in everything he does, especially in these Richard Curtis movies. They've collaborated a number of times together, and he always seems to steal the show. But man, for a guy that even says at multiple points how unsappy and unsentimental and unemotional he is, it's his performance that draws the tears out of you at the end of the film.
Yeah, 100%. When he and Donald Gleason are playing table tennis, and it's the last time, and then he just says, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump back one more time. I think we can break the rules a little bit. And you see him and his, 9-year-old son, Tim, playing in the water.
Mm-hmm.
It's just brutal, man.
Yeah.
There is no way around it. I think that in the hands of a lesser actor, he might have overplayed certain parts of the character. Mm-hmm. But with Bill Nighy, what the beautiful thing about his performance is how relaxed
I was just gonna say that word. And I think to the credit of Curtis as a director, everyone in this movie feels so relaxed into their characters. Even the characters who are supposed to be like high strung, like Vanessa Kirby's character or young Margot Robbie's character are kind of in that more like, I don't want to call them high strung, but you know what I mean? They're not like laid back the way that Donald Gleason's family is. And yet I just feel like everyone had such a comfort to the character they were supposed to be playing. It really demonstrated a real understanding of their parts on behalf of every actor.
Well, Bob, we've been jiving with this movie for quite some time now. I think it's time we drink some whiskey, man.
All right, let's get to it, man. We've got this Glenlivet 14. What do you say we round out this sample pack we've been working our way through? All right, so today we are rounding out our Glenlivet sampler with the Glenlivet 14 year. This is a cognac cask finished single malt Scotch whiskey. Brad, as you may be able to tell from the name, it's been aged for 14 years in a combination. What? I know.
No, you're a liar. Don't believe you.
13.2. They rounded up. It's been aged in a combination of first fill American casks and sherry casks. I think last week we mentioned a little bit about the definition of first fill, that it really just means like it's the first time they've filled it. So who knows how many times those casks were actually used, but it is finished for some undisclosed amount of time in ex-cognac casks. And
they were actually like orange juice casks,
right,
at one point.
Brad, I think we just had, was it a cognac finish that we did from Starlight? Was that last one we did from them? Oh, man.
We've drank a lot of whiskey
We've had so much whiskey, dude.
I don't remember.
I feel like we've just recently done a cognac finish. I might be wrong on that, but I'm excited to try this one. Again, this is the last one in the sampler, Brad, so let's hope we're going out with a bang here. What are you picking up on the nose of this 80 proof single malt?
Pear, apple tarts, hints of cinnamon.
Man, Bob, that was rapid fire right there.
Yeah, this is a nice nose. It is pleasant. Like everything else in the Glenlivet portfolio so far, it's just they have the nice, smooth, gentle aroma that I just really love. I have really enjoyed every single nose. Hasn't always translated to the taste and beyond. But for this one, once again, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I really like this nose.
I like this a lot, and it took me a minute to place it, but you know what it is for me, Brad?
What is it, Robert?
Craisins. Like those dried cranberries that you put on your salad or whatever. This is
that
like...
you ate as a 4-year-old.
I really like craisins, man. I don't know what to tell you. This smells, it's not like a really tart cranberry juice. It has that like really sugary, sun-dried thing going on with it. There's a little bit of vanilla underneath it, but the fruit is the dominant thing here. And, you know, obviously I think the cognac is giving it a little bit of that as well. But it's not necessarily grapey as much as it is like a cranberry for me. I like this a lot. I'm right with you. I think I'm actually going to give it an 8.5 on the nose.
Holy cow. Well, Bob, when I get into the taste here, it kind of drops off a little bit. It's a little bit watery. I have to say, if there's a drawback on Glenlivet that I've noticed, it really comes across as thin and watery compared to a lot of the other scotches I've had. But compared to the last two we've had, the two reserves, if you will, which I'll currently reserve my opinion on, this one has some really nice pear, a little bit of honey, and for me, it was more of like a baked apple. I really enjoyed this. It was a little drop off from the nose, but I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
Man, I don't know if I've ever tasted a single malt whiskey that barley, like just straight barley, is the predominant note for me. The weird thing about these Glenlivets, Brad, is that they have these incredible fruity kind of bouquets of a nose. And then the palate has almost no sweetness or tartness or fruit on them at all. This has a very kind of bland sweetness, but for the most part, it stays very, very flat. And you're right, like it's really thin. I'm going to say viscous because we haven't said it in a while. It is not viscous at all. This is an 80 proof whiskey, and it feels every bit of that, you know, dilution that you get here.
Bob, I think it's pronounced bouquet.
You don't say bouquet?
Boo?
You say bouquet?
No, I'm not. I'm not trying to scare like some small child.
What is it with you?
It's a bouquet.
Okay, fine. Whatever it is.
Bouquet.
You know what? I like how you waited like a full minute to interject that. I was like way past that.
The bouquet on the finish.
All right. So anyway,
is really oaky.
Well, I'm not. I didn't even give my score yet. Hold on a second. I'm still on the taste here. Yeah.
Yeah, what's your score on the taste?
I don't
Robert?
like it that much.
Really,
that's what I'm getting
really
at.
Want to hear it?
I don't like it that much. I think you're right. It's definitely more complex than the last two we had. I think the influence of the oak is much more predominant here because it's 14 year. But again, it has that like really ashy, burnt flavor at the end. It's not peat, but it's like a smoky ash that it kind of turns everything really bitter towards the end. I'm not a huge fan of this, Brad. I'm actually going to give it a 5 out of 10 on the taste.
Oh, you gave it your taste score finally. Yeah, so my finish, it's oaky, it's decently pleasant, and for me, this is kind of where that barley comes through. It got really grainy near the end for me. Not my favorite, but not a bad finish. I'll give it a 6.5.
Yeah, this really kind of, if I can like approximate the flavor that's left on your palate, it reminds me a lot of an IPA. Like it has that really bitter hops kind of thing going on for me.
That's a good call, dude.
And I don't know like where it's getting that influence from, but I'm also not a fan of IPAs. And Brad and I have talked extensively about how IPA is just not our favorite kind of beer. If you like really hoppy beer, maybe this is the single malt for you, but it has lots of smoke and lots of like hoppy bitterness to it. Other than that, the finish is not bad. There's a nice little burn. I think I like the finish a little bit better than the palate, so I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, and when it comes down to balance, I think that this is a decently balanced whiskey. I enjoyed every aspect of it. It didn't fall off too much by the end. I'll give it a 7 out of 10 on the balance.
Yeah, I'll give it a 6. I don't really, I feel so meh about this product that I don't really want to go any further than that. It's a 6.
Yeah, and that brings us out to our value score. Now, Bob, if you are in the grandiose state of Ohio, this bad boy is going to set you back $54.99. After tax, you're probably looking at about $60 for this bottle. What do you think about that? I don't know if this really has the legs to stand up to that price. And I'm going to bring up a fan podcast favorite here, Bob. Quinta Rubin, man.
The Quinta Rubin is 14 year. It is also a finished single malt Scotch whiskey.
Yeah,
now, that is a Highland single
exactly.
malt. This is a Speyside. I have talked extensively about how I don't really care for Speysides. They're just too mild for me. I think this suffers from that as well. By the time they get down to the proof they bottle at, which is 80 proof, it's so thin. It's so watery. And it's not even that I want a lot of alcohol. It's that it just really kind of dissipates the flavor out of the thing. I just wish this had some more complexity, some more like wow to it. This is nowhere near as good as the Quinta Rubin is. I would say that even like the Glenmorangie La Santa and the Glenmorangie Nectar d'Or are both head and shoulders better than this one is. So yeah, at the price point, I don't know if I can justify it, Brad. I'm going to give it a 5.5 on value.
Yeah, Bob, honestly, for me, when it comes down to it, I would suggest people, if you're looking for a really good Speyside, go check out the Aberlour 12 year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it has 2 years less than this, but I think there's a lot more depth of complexity and richness and flavor that you're getting from a whiskey that's 2 years younger, but still only costs $55.
Yeah, Aberlour, especially when you get into some of their higher end stuff, the Abuna is really, really, really good.
Yes.
So yeah, Brad, I'm glad that we tried this sampler pack. Again, we got 4 50 milliliter samples of different expressions of Glenlivet for $10. So this sample of 14 cost $2.50. Brad and I split it, and we paid $1.25 each. And this was worth $1.25, and I'm happy with that. But I don't think that it's worth a $55 to $60 bottle. So I'm not going to recommend this one. Brad, would you recommend?
Bob, recommending... I would say that this one might be worth a glass if you're out. I don't think I'd recommend a bottle.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same place here. So, Brad, I'm coming out to a 31.5 out of 50. Not a bad whiskey, but it's just not exciting enough for me to recommend.
Yeah, I'm at a 34 out of 50, which is really close to that, kind of that barrier that we've placed for ourselves of 35 out of 50. It's a solid whiskey. It's the best of the 4 that we've had, but unfortunately, I'm with you. I don't know if I'd recommend it.
You know, I don't even know if I'd call it the best of the 4. I think the 12 was actually probably better than this, and when you factor in value, I think it's kind of a no-brainer when you compare the two.
Yeah, no, you're right. I misspoke there. 100%. The Glenlivet 12, go try it. It's a nice double oaked offering. The rest of them, though, they're a little bit of a hit and miss, Bob.
All right, so we're coming out to a 65.5 out of 100 or a 32.75 out of 50 on average. We'd like to know what you think. If you've tried the Glenlivet 14, you can reach out to us at all of our social accounts at Film Whiskey. But Brad, we have to get back into talking about a movie here. So what do you say we pick up the conversation about time?
It's about time, Bob. All right, everybody. That was Glenlivet 14, a whiskey that Bob and I were both just a little bit iffy on. And it's just a little disappointing, Bob, because we love whiskey and we want to drink good whiskey.
Yeah. What can you do, man?
We want to tell people about good whiskey.
Brad, if you could go back in time and drink a different whiskey, would you have done that?
No, man. I'm happy with the life
living in the moment.
Living.
Well, I like it. I like it.
Yeah. Because if I'd gone back and not drank it, then I wouldn't have known what I now know. I appreciate the experience.
This movie has taught you so many lessons.
It's because I watched it 3 times. Just like Tim going back and having sex with Rachel McAdams 3. And it was definitely only 3 times.
Only.
Definitely not any more than that.
No. He had it mastered by the 3rd time.
Bob, I have to say, I'm really excited right now. Do you want to know why?
Why is that, Brad?
Because we are about to reveal the newest segment of the Film and Whiskey podcast.
Yeah, we are.
Bob, we are about to do 2 facts and a falsehood. This is the childhood game that everybody has played. I am about to tell Bob 3 facts, but unfortunately one of them isn't a fact. It's a falsehood. And we need to see if Bob knows which one is true and which one is false.
I have to say, man, I applaud your timing here because, we're recording this episode at a time in the week, Brad, where both of us are just like, this is the only window I have to record. So at the last second, we decided to hop on and record this episode. And you just happen to know intuitively that I have not had a chance to look at my notes on this movie. I haven't had a chance to go back and do any more research. So you caught me at the perfect time to ask me trivia.
You got it, man. I was going to say, I think that for the movies I've picked, it might be a little bit easier to trick you. I'm very curious when we're on your films, if I'm going to be able to get you.
So are you going to, it's always going to be you stumping me? Is that the plan here?
I mean, we can do it however you want, man. If you want to try to stump me, you can try. I doubt you'll be able to do it, but.
Question 1, what is the name of the director of this film?
I know I wrote it down here somewhere.
All right, man, let's get into it. I'm excited. 2 truths, or not 2 truths and a lie. 2 facts and a falsehood. Let's do it.
2 facts and a falsehood. Fact number 1, this was Richard Griffith's final movie. Fact number 2, this movie was shipped to theaters under the code name Cupboard. Fact number 3, there was an earlier version of this script that was supposed to be released in the 1990s. And the person playing Tim was going to be Ewan McGregor.
Interesting. All right, can I ask one clarifying question before I make my choice here?
You can.
For like really complicated bits of trivia, like take letter C.
Uh-huh.
Would you change like just one little element of it to make it false? Or would the whole, if it was like, oh, it's supposed to take place in the 1990s, but it was actually supposed to be Johnny Depp. Like, would you do that or would you just completely change the whole thing?
I think my goal is to just completely make up a fact.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to go, man, these are good. Because it could be B, too. Because I don't really know why they would need to ship it under a code name. It wasn't like people were clamoring for this movie.
I've got to see Tonal Gleason.
I'm going to go with A. I feel like Richard Griffiths made at least one more movie after this.
Bob, this was indeed Richard Griffith's final movie.
All right. So you got me. I'm 0 for 1.
I did. Wow. I nailed it. We need to keep track of that.
All right. What was the falsehood?
It was the C, the earlier version starring Ewan McGregor.
Interesting.
What prompted me to change that was, I'll give you another fact, Zooey Deschanel was originally cast as Mary.
This would have been an objectively worse film with Zooey Deschanel.
100%.
But see, that's exactly what I'm getting at, is that Rachel McAdams was like this kind of movie's version of the manic pixie dream girl. They wrote her almost as a Zooey Deschanel. And I feel like Rachel McAdams is the only thing keeping that character from being the completely unrealistic character that Kirsten Dunst was in Elizabethtown. Do you know what I mean? Like it's almost like she undermined how simplistic the character was supposed to be, and she actually brought more to it than I think was actually there on the page.
Bob, I think that Rachel McAdams might be the most charming actress working today.
Yeah.
Like her ability to just be adorable and just suck you into whatever role she's playing is almost second to none. I just love her in this. So I'm with you, dude. I think that the character was a little bit underwritten, but because of her performance, man, I just love it. I buy into their romance 200%.
Absolutely. All right, man. I think this is a good place to give final scores. I've said about all I need to say about this movie, and I'll let you have the last word because it's your movie. So I'll give my final score. I think objectively, this is like an 8 out of 10 to an 8.5 out of 10. Again, like there's just a little bit of pacing issues. There's a little bit of unevenness to the tone of the movie in the first hour and 15 minutes or so. But what works about this movie works so well. And it is such a Like, they take a very simple premise and they make such a heartfelt film out of it. And, we haven't even talked about the narration, the voiceover that Tim gives throughout the movie. I think that can be a little cheesy at times. And I kind of, if I wasn't already weeping at the end of the movie, I think that the final voiceover may have kind of pulled me back from that a little. Because he goes on to say, like, I don't even go back in time anymore. I just live each day as if, and it's like a very much like, do you get it? The audience, you can be just like me. You too can live each day. And I felt like they had already implied that. And then they made it like explicit at the end of the movie. And I kind of hated that. So it's not like this is a perfect movie. But damn it, if it doesn't just, I mean, Brad, I was just like ugly crying at the end of this movie. And it's not that it's like a sad movie. It's a very life-affirming movie. And that's why it works. So even though I think objectively it's like an 8 to an 8.5, my enjoyment of it is like a 9 to a 9.5. I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10, Brad.
Man, Bob, I love that you gave it a 9 out of 10. I will say, I think that what would have worked at the end of the movie is if you almost had like a Terrence Malick, Emmanuel Lubezki Tree of Life style ending, where you just get, maybe not as fast as they do in Tree of Life, but you just get cuts of their life. When they're younger, when they're having kids, when they're older. Like if you had just gotten cuts of Tim's life for 3 minutes straight as the beautiful piano music just slowly faded out, that would have been a heck of an ending, man.
Yeah, I agree. Wow, that's a good point.
In the end, I'm actually right there with you, man. I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. When you brought up pacing, I think that was what hit me this time through. The movie feels a little bit rushed at certain points and then really slow at other points. And I'm never bothered by the slow parts. It just feels like it's a little bit uneven. I will say the one scene that dragged on a little bit too long for me, and I think it's because it came later in the movie, was when Rachel McAdams is trying on dresses.
Oh my gosh.
It just went on about 3 dresses too long.
Well, and literally, like, I don't mean to compare it to 27 dresses, but it had that, like literally the same text to it. But, like,
yeah,
it was also, okay, is this like an early 2000s rom-com now? Like, are we just going to have a montage of, like, let's try on clothes? It was out of left field.
Yeah, and I get what they're trying to go for. Like, this is the life he's living. He's willing to sit through these things with his wife because it's these little moments that are beautiful in the end. I get that. But it just dragged on. Yeah. So there's definitely a few moments like that throughout the movie that make it not a perfect film. But guys, it is a easy 9 out of 10 from the two of us. Y'all need to see About Time. I think that's the moral of the story, Bob.
And it is currently streaming on Netflix. And I don't think we've hit the end of February yet, so they probably haven't removed it. If you're listening to this, I mean, I highly recommend it. Brad, I had a really good talk with my wife yesterday just about, like, life and our hopes and dreams. And I brought up the fact that, like, 3 of the last 4 movies on our podcast have been these very life-affirming films. And I'm so happy that we got to do, Walter Mitty and this movie, and then, for you, Secondhand Lions, for me, on a much lesser scale, Elizabethtown. I mean, like, Elizabethtown was kind of a failure of a movie, but the purpose...
Was Elizabethtown life-affirming?
I mean, like, the very end of the movie, and you get what I'm saying. Anyway... A little bit. I was happy that we've gotten into a rhythm of watching movies like this. I know that not every film we're going to watch this season is super uplifting or even, deals in these themes. So it's just nice to have a string of them right now.
Yeah. We always have times of life where things are down a little bit and you're kind of struggling through things. And really in those times, I think that the right movie can really bring about a change of attitude, a change of heart. And I'm with you, dude. These movies have been very encouraging for me, especially Elizabethtown. I mean, oh my gosh, I needed that movie. Guys, in the end, you don't need to hear Bob and I bicker anymore because we want to know what you have to say. Jump on any of the social medias, find us at Film Whiskey, engage in the conversation, or jump onto our Discord. We are on there every single day talking to you, the faithful listeners of the Film and Whiskey podcast. Discord's so easy to set up if you've never used it before. You can go at the end of any of our show notes and find a link to it there. And if you really believe in us, you really love what we're doing, throw us a buck or two on Patreon.
All right, man, we are watching what is, in my opinion, the best comedy of the 2000s, Richard Linklater's School of Rock, another movie that just makes me feel so affirmed in life. I am super excited to watch that, Brad, because it's a perfect movie.
You want to know the reality? I never had a single thing against School of Rock until you put it as your top comedy of the 2000s, and now I actively have a dislike for that movie.
And I want you to think about how structurally perfect this movie is. It's a perfectly written movie. We will be back next week to watch School of Rock, but until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.